Joe Hockey, good morning, welcome.
Morning, Barry, and happy Mother's Day.
Well, I'm
well,
sure
to
that's
my
appropriate
mum,
in
happy
my
Mother's
case.
Day,
Yeah. What do you make of that initiative on what is virtually a swap with Malaysia?
Well, I must say, when I first heard about it, I thought kids in the schoolyard would do a better trading deal than this. But this is trading human beings, and it seems like it is a panicked reaction to a failed border protection policy. And quite frankly, it illustrates the fact that this government has no sense of having a consistent policy on border protection.
But this is the first time, though, that any government has really introduced something that just might be a really effective deterrent, in the sense that these people will know if they make the trip, they will end up at the back of a queue in Malaysia.
Well, hang on. We set up the Pacific solution, but it also had temporary protection visas as well, backing it up. So this is a temporary solution. On the one hand, Wayne Swan says that this is the first step with Malaysia. On the other hand, the High Commissioner for Malaysia has said that this is a one-off. This illustrates the panic of the government at the fact that under them, border protection policies have failed. There are more than 11,000 people that have come on boats since this government was elected, Barry, and they are spending close to $1 billion on this. This year alone, $750 million trying to manage the centres, for example, that are like Villawood, that are on fire. It's just bizarre politics, it's bizarre policy, it's bad policy, and I think it illustrates what a failed government it is.
You said you did something like this before in Nauru. The difference is that almost all of those people in Nauru ended up in Australia. The difference here, if they're saying to these people...
No, that's actually not right. Less than 50%, according to Chris Evans. Less than 50% actually ended up in Australia out of Nauru.
Well, you know, the number with this plan is zero.
No, it isn't. It's 4,000 refugees coming here. 4,000 refugees are going to come to Australia, this time through the vetting process in Malaysia.
They're people who have stood in the queue and done everything right.
In Malaysia?
Yes. So why shouldn't they be given entry to Australia?
Well, because it's a trade-off, Barry. It's a trade-off. We're sending them 800 people on boats, which is only about 12 boats. So it's a temporary solution. It's only 12 boats.
But you're constantly saying that people should do the right thing. They should stand in the queue. Well, these people in Malaysia, the 4,000 they will take, have done that. So why shouldn't they be rewarded in that way?
Well, because from our perspective, it means the Malaysians are having an influence on our refugee program rather than our own government.
Can we use the 4,000?
Well, our strong view is that you've got to manage your own borders. And that means managing the policy of your own borders. And that means that Malaysia doesn't say it's going to send 4,000 people here. It means that our government says that we are going to take people from these parts of the world under these circumstances. We're not going to have anything defined by the Malaysian government. From our perspective, you need to retain control. And with Nauru, we retained control. Under this circumstance, it's a bilateral deal with another country, and even today they appear to be at odds with us on policy.
OK, let's talk about the budget now. What do you think should be the government's main aim in the budget?
Well, it has to get back to surplus. Labor will never deliver a surplus budget, Barry. They never will.
2012-13.
They won't deliver it. Labor has always talked about surplus budgets. It never will deliver a surplus budget.
But there's a massive political imperative this time around, if not an economic one. And you still doubt they'll get there in 2012-13?
Well, on budget night, when they claim to deliver a surplus in 2012-13, there'll be a gaping hole. And the hole will be the carbon tax. So the revenue figures in 2012-13 will be wrong, because there's no carbon tax. The expenditure figures will be wrong. The inflation figure will be wrong. The growth figure will be wrong.
It's true that the carbon tax figures won't be there, but isn't it generally accepted that the figures will be broadly neutral in that first year?
No, because revenue will be higher. We want to see the government keep to its own fiscal goals, which it doesn't talk about anymore, that it's going to have revenue at no more than 23.5% of GDP, the last year of the Howard government. Secondly, it's not going to spend more than 2% in real terms in growth. And thirdly, they said they were going to have a budget surplus over the fiscal cycle. Well, I say to you, Barry, if the carbon tax is in there, I would expect that all the rules would be broken. And obviously, when it comes to revenue and expenditure, the numbers will be wrong on budget night because it does not include the carbon tax. And just to make this point, on budget night in 2012-13, the mining tax will be in the budget, the carbon tax will not, and they both start on exactly the same day.
You're saying, though, that you could get the budget back into surplus before 2012-13?
I said we would try to do it, yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Could you?
Well, I don't know what the numbers are. We'll see on Tuesday night. But we outlined before the last election over $50 billion of savings, including reducing the Commonwealth Public Service by 12,000. Now, they were hard measures, Barry, but we are determined to do it. If you want to take pressure off families, if you want to take upward pressure off interest rates, you have to get back to surplus as quickly as possible.
That $50 billion figure you mentioned was discredited immediately after the election.
Well, it was so discredited that the government itself used some of the measures that they discredited.
What about cost of living pressures? What should they be doing about that?
Well, the best thing you can do is take upward pressure off interest rates at this moment. And the starting point has to be to stop spending so much money. And this week we've seen the government spending an enormous amount of money. Julia Gillard got off the plane and she decided to smoke her credit card with the Australian people. Over $1.5 billion they committed. Even today they're handing out set-top boxes to pensioners. The secret to getting into surplus is to stop spending so much money.
So you wouldn't be handing out the set-top boxes?
We wouldn't be spending so much money,
Would you be
Barry.
handing out the set-top boxes?
Well, there will be instances, can I tell you, Barry, there will be instances where you will have an initiative here, an initiative there. The bottom line is this government said it was going to have a tough budget. It's not having a tough budget because all it's done in the last 5 days is announce expenditure items. And I'll tell you what it does. It illustrates that Wayne Swan has lost control of his own budget. But it couldn't be better illustrated than the fact. This morning on TV, Wayne Swan said he would not confirm cuts to the defence budget. But in fact, Stephen Smith went on radio and confirmed $300 million of cuts. His own defence minister.
To the civilian arm of that,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
but the fact is the defence minister is out announcing cuts in the budget, and now the Treasurer won't confirm them. And his own defence minister went out and announced it. So it is a confused message, and what it illustrates is the government has no direction, and it can't be trusted at its word.
I just want to explore this cost of living thing one more time. The Herald Sun this week, they published some research that they'd commissioned for the University of Canberra, and it showed that the average Australian household is $23 a day better off than 5 years ago. Do you accept that?
No. I think cost of living is the biggest issue for Australians.
But they've done the work, they've done the research. That's got to beat political rhetoric any time.
Well, it's not political rhetoric, Barry. If you go and speak to everyday Australians, they are doing it tougher. Their electricity prices are up, their housing costs are up, the cost of food and veggies is up.
But that's anecdotal evidence.
No, I'm sorry.
This is research.
It is not anecdotal evidence. It is reflected in the CPI numbers, because what comes through in the CPI numbers, which is fact, is that the things people want, like televisions and computers, are cheaper. But the things people need are more expensive, like fruit, vegetables and petrol.
But what politicians who are constantly telling people you've never had it so bad, what you ignore is that wages have gone up, that taxes are down, and that welfare benefits in a lot of cases are up as well.
I don't accept taxes down. This is the first year in 8 years that there will be no income tax cut for everyday Australians.
Yes, but this retrospectively over the last 5 years, they have come down.
Well, they have come down because we put in place a system of tax cuts that delivers real benefits to Australians.
You did.
Everyday Australians. We did that. We did it because we could run budget surpluses.
And that's why cost of living, in fact, the pressure has gone off, not the other way around.
I don't accept that. From my perspective, speaking to everyday Australians, Barry, they do not understand why everyone tells them life is so good, the government tells them life is so good, and yet they're facing higher costs in their everyday life. I mean, it is the paradox of modern politics that the economists say things are great and the best terms of trade ever, but for everyday Australians, life's harder. And it shows the government's out of touch because they don't understand it. They believe the economists, what we're doing is listening to the people.
Let's have a look at some of the initiatives that are announced. Set-top boxes, we'll take that as a no. You didn't support it.
Well, no, so, I want to see the context of it, Barry.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a warehouse full of all these set-top boxes for people. I don't know. But what I do know is that in the days before the budget, they're announcing another $300 million. OK,
teenage mums. Now, the initiative's there to get them either back to school or back into the workforce, yes or no?
Well, it's good to get people into the workforce, provided there is a right support network. It's no use putting the pressure on teenage mums in a pilot program, I might add, putting pressure on teenage mums if they can't get childcare.
They're saying they will provide the childcare, at least in the pilot program.
But actually, I understand the childcare they're referring to is under an existing scheme.
Right, so is that a maybe?
The JET scheme. So
that's a maybe, right?
Again, we'll look at it.
A maybe?
Look at the detail.
And what about this payment of $10,000 for families with teenage kids to get them through to Year 12?
Well, again, I mean, I'm curious as to why the government is proceeding with this, handing out so much money at this point in time. But if it is an extraordinary way to ease the pressure on families, but even more so, I'm not convinced that giving money to parents is going to prevent a child going off and becoming a plumber or electrician, leaving school early.
So that's a don't know or a maybe?
Well, we don't know the details. Look,
okay,
every time,
right.
Can I just say this, Barry? Every time we are asked about these sorts of issues, we find out, when we get into the detail, that it's a very different initiative.
Well, every time you're asked about these, you never get a yes. That's
Well, you'll see our yes or no in Parliament.
all right. What about the fringe benefit thing for people who are lucky enough to have a car as part of their employment? The changes that they're proposing there, yes
Well,
or no?
I don't accept lucky enough, mate. I just don't. For a tradie, for a sparky, for people that are on building sites, for a whole lot of Australians, their car is their business. And I suspect this is going to make their motor vehicles a whole lot more expensive. And we want to see the details on that. If you live outside of Melbourne, in Geelong, say you live in Geelong and you drive to Melbourne for work, your car is your business and your livelihood. So this idea of making it more expensive through higher taxes seems to me a little bit rich.
And just finally on the banks and the review, the inquiry concluded this week, and they recommended a review of the banking system, and they want to see a breakup of the dominance of the four banks. Do you support that?
Well, I have warned that exit fees will affect non-bank players, and that's been reflected in the Senate inquiry outcomes. Now, Wayne Swan needs to listen to the senators that have done the hard work that he never did, and look at how smaller players are not going to be disadvantaged by the cumbersome policy of the government on exit fees.
The background of this, so this was called when the banks last year they raised the home loan rates by more than the Reserve Bank's cash rate, and there was hell to pay from politicians on both sides, and yet the inquiry now found that banks acted in response to higher funding costs. And that's an embarrassment to politicians everywhere, isn't it?
No, not at all. Because I don't accept that the banks didn't have the capacity to cut slack to their customers. And in fact, when some of the banks went much higher than other banks, it reflected the fact that some were listening to their customers, others weren't.
Okay. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks, Barry.